The war on terrorism was waged against militant organizations like Al-Qaeda with the purpose of eliminating them. Bush used the phrase "war on terror" to denote the struggle they faced against terrorism or administrations that were suspected of having connections to them or offering them with support, or were a threat against the Allies, but most important, it was a response to 9/11. In October of 2001, U.S. passed the Patriot Act. It was in response to 9/11 and it established a reduction of America's daily freedoms and law restrictions by enforcing agencies' gathering of intelligence within the U.S. It also included domestic terrorism as a part of the terrorism definition. Iraq was invaded because it was assumed of having weapons of mass destruction and represented a threat to the Allies, so they passed the resolution 1441, which stated that Iraq would cooperate with complete inspection for those kinds of weapons. There was no evidence of the weapons. Later, the U.S. accused Iraq's President Saddam Hussein of concealing Afghanistan's invasion was to catch Osama bin Laden and the other members of the Al-Qaeda so they could be put on trial. To abolish Al-Qaeda and eliminate the Taliban regime, President Bush justifies these invasions with, "I am driven with a mission from God. God would tell me, George, go and find these terrorists from Afghanistan." And I did. And then God would tell me, George, go and end the tyranny in Iraq. And I did. Bush drove the economy to an aftermath we have to live with past our generation. The effects of his economic disaster are a tax code that biased in favor of the rich, a national debt, an enlargement of mortgage defaults, a record near $800 billion trade deficit, highest oil prices in American history, and a very weak dollar. This has left the U.S. less prepared for the future than ever before. The Enron Corporation has various connections with the Bush family, starting with that Enron had backed financially Bush's political career. In total, Enron donated over $600,000 to Bush. Also, the Bush family had personal nicknames to the founder of Enron. In 2001, U.S. had a big concern with the nation's education. This is where they made the No Child Left Behind Act. This act included with the government giving aid to programs to disadvantaged students. Also, it required states to develop assessments in basic skills for regular students.
The Kyoto Protocol is the first international agreement to fight global warming. It was signed by 141 nations, including all Europe and all other developed industrial nations except the US and Australia. The pact went into effect on February 16, 2005 and expires in 2012. George Bush pulled the U.S. out of the Kyoto Accords as one of the first acts of his presidency. Bush dismisses the Kyoto Protocol as too costly, describing it as an unrealistic and over-tightening straitjacket. George W. Bush lied to the U.S. legislature and the American people in his 2003 State of Union address, where he claimed that Iraq had ties to terrorism and that Iraq had tried to purchase yellow cake uranium from a Nigerian and that he used this as a reason to invade Iraq, when he was really doing that to make an excuse to invade Iraq for the oil. Which is why it is not hard to believe a conspiracy theories that allege he was somehow behind the attacks of the WTC complex. What George W. Bush wanted to achieve on the new security agencies in the United States are champion aspirations for human dignity, strengthen the alliances to defeat global terrorism, and transform America's national security institutions to meet the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century. Bush was criticized for not returning to Washington, D.C. from his vacation in more than a day after the Hurricane Katrina hit on Monday. Many claim that on the morning of August 28, the president telephoned the mayor to plead for a mandatory evacuation of New Orleans, and further claim that the mayor and Governor Blanco decided to evacuate the city only in response to that request. These claims were never substantiated. Now let's get to know George W. Bush.
So, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
The challenge facing the United States is that we have to be right one time. I mean, 100% of the time. It's hard for me to explain why that was the case. Just take my word for it. Just seems like I was here yesterday. I was. Kind of. Anybody here got 4 kids? 3 kids? You got 4? 4. 3, okay. All right, wait. I don't know why I asked that. Oh, I know why I asked it. The best way to defeat this enemy in the long run is to deny them the recruiting tools that are and recruitments made possible by resentment. I'd like to stay here all day, but I gotta go to Vegas. Something about what goes on there stays there, or something like that, you know. Thanks for coming. Be seated. Thanks for coming. Welcome to the White House. Thanks for coming. He didn't like the way the cotton shirts that he wore absorbed, his bodily fluids. Last night, Jeb and I had some crabs. Look like members of the 1972 Miami Dolphins. Dan Marino and his really dynamic wife. TV stars. Andy Garcia. I like to mountain bike. I like to put a little country and western music on my iPod. I think the Japanese people are going to like the taste of U.S. beef. Matter of fact, I had a good slice of beef last night. I can see Laura beginning to grimace a little bit. She said, he's getting awfully windy. It's a Texas term. I'm serious about it. You'll be. Let me. There would have been a deficit, but there wouldn't have been the commensurate, the kick to our economy. Are you having burritos for lunch? The tourists. Barney is my dog. That House Republicans last fall passed strong earmark reform ideas. Put forth earmark reform ideas. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, tell people why I say that. I mean, I think they're cost effective. That there be a stable Iran. Iran that is capable of rejecting Iranian influence. I mean, Iraq. I like to fish. I met an onion grower today at the airport when I arrived, and he said, "You got to help me find people that'll pull onions, pluck them, or whatever you do with them, you know." And it is a. I think it is. And it's a. At least. The elections. I think. Tide turning, as I remember, I was raised in the desert, but tides kind of, it's easy to see a tide turn. Did I say those words?